greedy man threw her and their son out. Now she's the prosecutor in his trial. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Emma had always believed that love and loyalty were the bedrock of marriage. When she met Alan, he was charming, ambitious, and ready to take on the world. They had a whirlwind romance, and before she knew it, Emma was standing at the altar, vowing to be by his side through thick and thin. Little did she know that Alan's ambition was like a fire, burning hotter and brighter with each passing year, sometimes dangerously so. At first, Emma admired Alan's drive. He spoke often of a future they'd build together, filled with prosperity and comfort. Emma's support was unwavering, even when Alan took financial risks that others might have avoided. His business ventures, though sometimes volatile, seemed to bring steady growth. Emma trusted him and made sacrifices to keep the household running smoothly, particularly after their son Leo was born. Leo became her world, her anchor, while Alan seemed to drift farther into his work. Years went by, and Alan's business faced increasingly turbulent waters. Emma noticed his behavior changing. He was distant, irritable, and secretive. Long hours became sleepless nights, and Emma could feel the strain on their marriage. Yet she clung to hope, certain that her devotion and faith in Alan would see them through the hard times. She never questioned his decisions or motives, even when things started to feel suspiciously off-kilter. The breaking point came on a cold winter evening. Alan came home, his expression as cold as the wind that whipped outside. Emma sensed that something was terribly wrong, but she couldn't have imagined the bombshell he was about to drop. Without preamble, Alan told her he'd filed for divorce. He had already arranged everything with his lawyers, and they had no choice but to leave the house within a week. Stunned, Emma asked about their savings, her trust in him beginning to crack. Alan revealed that there was nothing left. He had drained every last cent from their accounts, including the trust fund she'd painstakingly saved for Leo's future. Her disbelief turned to rage, but Alan's tone was stone cold as he dismissed her concerns. To him, she was a liability he couldn't afford. With little more than a few packed bags, Emma and Leo left the house they'd once called home. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. Her entire world had been torn from her, and she was left with nothing but her son and the echo of a shattered marriage. But as she held Leo close that night in a shabby motel room, a new determination began to burn within her. She would rebuild not for herself but for her son. And no one, not even Alan, would stand in her way again. Emma took on any work she could find to support Leo, doing everything from waitressing to cleaning offices. She worked late into the night and woke up early each morning, determined to build a better life for them both. Through sheer grit and resilience, she managed to scrape together enough to enroll in law school. Every day was a battle, balancing her studies with the demands of motherhood, but the vision of a better future for Leo pushed her forward. Law school was grueling, yet Emma found herself thriving in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her professors noticed her sharp mind and her unwavering dedication, traits she had honed through years of hardship. She quickly gained a reputation as one of the most promising students in her class, a woman whose spirit was unbreakable. Leo, now a bright and resilient young boy, was her biggest supporter, reminding her every day why she'd embarked on this difficult journey. Years passed, and Emma graduated at the top of her class, her hard work finally bearing fruit. She quickly climbed the ranks within the prosecutor's office, known for her tenacity and fierce commitment to justice. Emma had transformed into a woman unrecognizable from the one Alan had left behind. Where there had once been naivety, there was now steely resolve. Where there had been blind trust, there was now sharp discernment. Just as her life seemed to settle into a new rhythm, Emma received a case that would change everything. It was a high-profile fraud investigation involving a business executive accused of scamming investors out of millions of dollars. The defendant, none other than Alan. Emma's heart froze as she read his name, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over her. The man who had once thrown her and Leo out with nothing was now at the mercy of the law, and she held the power to prosecute him. Emma took a deep breath, the memories of her past with Alan coming back in vivid flashes. She hadn't seen him since the day he threw her and Leo out, and now, as fate would have it, their paths were crossing again under circumstances she never could have foreseen. She was no longer the vulnerable woman he had once dismissed. Now she stood on the opposite side of the courtroom, wielding the power of justice, and Alan was the one in the hot seat. Her superiors were well aware of her personal history with the defendant, yet they trusted her to handle the case with the utmost professionalism. Emma was determined to prove them right. She poured herself into the case, spending late nights reviewing stacks of evidence, sifting through Alan's records, and preparing her arguments. Every document she uncovered painted a clearer picture of the man Alan had become, a ruthless schemer, capable of betraying anyone for his own gain. Alan's alleged fraud was staggering in scale. He had established a series of investment schemes promising exorbitant returns, drawing in countless investors who trusted him with their life savings. But instead of fulfilling his promises, Alan funneled their money into offshore accounts, living lavishly while his victims were left penniless. Emma felt a sense of poetic justice as she reviewed the charges, knowing that he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. As the trial date approached, Emma felt the weight of her past bearing down on her. She had built a life she was proud of, one defined by resilience and integrity, and she wouldn't let her personal history with Alan cloud her judgment. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about ensuring that justice was served, not just for herself and Leo but for all those who had fallen victim to Alan's greed. When the trial began, the courtroom was filled with journalists, families of the victims, and onlookers drawn by the sensational nature of the case. Emma entered with her head held high, her gaze steady as she made her way to the prosecution's table. Across the room, she saw Alan for the first time in years. He looked different. His once confident demeanor was replaced with an air of desperation. The realization that he was no longer in control seemed to weigh heavily on him. As the proceedings began, Emma laid out her opening statement with precision and conviction, detailing the extent of Alan's deception and the devastating impact on his victims. She spoke not only as a prosecutor but also as someone who had first-hand experience of his betrayals. Her voice was unwavering as she painted a picture of a man who had preyed on the trust of others, using his charisma to manipulate and deceive. One by one, Emma called witnesses to the stand, former business partners, financial experts, and victims of Alan's schemes. Each testimony added another layer to the case, exposing the depths of his fraud. The stories were heartbreaking, and Emma felt a profound empathy for each victim. She knew what it was like to be deceived, to have your life upended by someone you trusted implicitly. Alan's defense team tried to counter with arguments of financial mismanagement and market fluctuations, painting him as a victim of unfortunate circumstances. But Emma was relentless. She presented concrete evidence of his offshore accounts, meticulously tracing every dollar he had siphoned from his investors. She even revealed emails and documents proving that he had orchestrated every aspect of the scam, showing the jury just how calculated his actions had been. Days turned into weeks, and the trial continued with Emma's case growing stronger by the day. She could see Alan becoming increasingly anxious, his confident facade crumbling under the weight of the evidence. She felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that justice was within reach, yet she remained focused on the task at hand, careful not to let her personal feelings cloud her duty. But it was during one of the recesses that an unexpected encounter shifted the entire trajectory of the trial. While reviewing her notes in a quiet corner of the courthouse, Emma was approached by an older woman. She introduced herself as Martha, a former employee of Alan's, and she had information that could change the case. Martha revealed that Alan had manipulated her into creating fake accounting records, doctoring the books to hide his misdeeds. Emma listened carefully as Martha recounted her experience. She had been one of Alan's most trusted employees, loyal to a fault. But when she discovered the truth, he threatened her livelihood, forcing her into silence. Now Martha was ready to come forward, even if it meant facing repercussions herself. Emma's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of Martha's testimony. This was the missing piece she had been searching for, the evidence that would unequivocally seal Alan's fate. The next day, Martha took the stand. Her testimony was powerful, revealing the inner workings of Alan's fraudulent empire. She described how he had exploited her loyalty, coercing her into fabricating numbers and lying to investors. Her voice shook with emotion as she recounted the years she had spent living in fear, burdened by the weight of his deception. Emma watched as the jury absorbed every word, their faces reflecting the shock and disgust that mirrored her own. Alan's reaction was one of panic. For the first time, he looked directly at Emma, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. But there was no forgiveness in her gaze, only a steely resolve that mirrored the strength she had gained over the years. She would see this through to the end, not just for herself but for every person he had wronged. With Martha's testimony, the case against Alan became undeniable. Emma's closing arguments were a powerful reminder of the trust that he had violated, the lives he had shattered, and the justice that his victims deserved. She spoke with the same conviction that had carried her through law school and into the prosecutor's office. Her words a testament to the resilience and integrity that had defined her journey. The jury deliberated for hours, and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Emma sat with her colleagues, her mind a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. She thought of Leo, the little boy who had grown up watching her struggle and triumph, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path she had walked. No matter the outcome, she knew she had given everything she had to this case. When the jury returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Alan's face went pale as the words echoed through the courtroom. He had lost everything: his reputation, his freedom, and the last shred of control he had desperately clung to. The sentence was severe, reflecting the magnitude of his crimes, and Emma felt a sense of closure as the gavel fell. But as she left the courthouse, a lingering thought crossed her mind. She had won the case, but this was more than just a victory in the courtroom. It was a testament to the power of resilience, to the strength that had carried her from a shattered marriage to the halls of justice. She had faced her past, and in doing so, she had reclaimed her future. Emma left the courthouse with a strange mix of triumph and lingering unease. She had achieved her goal, finally bringing Alan to justice. Yet, as she returned home that evening, her mind couldn't rest. For years, she'd been driven by a desire to prove herself, to rewrite the narrative Alan had tried to trap her in. But now, with the verdict behind her, she wondered what lay ahead. She had rebuilt her life around resilience, around being strong for herself and Leo, but the chapter she'd closed left room for something she hadn't anticipated: peace. Leo, now a teenager, sensed the change in his mother. He'd grown up watching her sacrifice, study, and struggle, always pushing forward no matter the odds. That evening, he surprised her by preparing dinner, a modest but thoughtful meal that reminded Emma of how far they had come together. They shared laughter, the kind that seemed lighter than ever before, and Emma realized that her victory had paved the way for a new kind of life, a life without the shadows of betrayal or the pressure of revenge. In the weeks following the trial, Emma returned to work with renewed purpose. She focused on cases that resonated with her, particularly those involving families and victims of fraud. Her reputation as a dedicated prosecutor continued to grow, and she received several offers to speak at legal conferences. Each opportunity was a reminder of the life she had created, a life built not on Alan's betrayal but on her own strength and determination. But her past was not yet fully behind her. A few months after the trial, she received an unexpected visitor at her office. It was Martha, the former employee who had testified against Alan. Emma welcomed her warmly, grateful for the bravery Martha had shown during the trial. But there was something different about Martha now. A hesitant look in her eyes, as if she carried a new burden. "I thought you should know," Martha began, her voice quiet yet firm. "There's something else about Alan's schemes that we never uncovered. I didn't think it would matter after the trial, but it's been bothering me." She explained how, during the years she worked for Alan, he had spoken cryptically about investments he made that weren't on record. Martha suspected he had stashed assets under aliases, an entire fortune hidden away from the law. Emma felt a surge of anger and disbelief. Even after all this time, Alan had more secrets. But instead of feeling daunted, she was energized. This was a loose end, a chance to recover what he had stolen and possibly reclaim funds for his victims. She immediately set to work, reopening the files and digging into the case with renewed fervor. As she delved into Alan's financial history, Emma uncovered a trail that led her to several shell companies and foreign accounts linked to his offshore holdings. The discovery was staggering. Alan had not only scammed investors, but he had also managed to secure millions under assumed names, money he had likely intended to use once he was out of prison. Emma felt a grim satisfaction as she uncovered account after account, knowing she was dismantling the last of his empire piece by piece. Her findings led to a court order, and within weeks, she secured a judgment to freeze the assets and begin the process of repaying his victims. The impact was immediate and transformative. Families who had lost everything to Alan's schemes received restitution checks, their lives uplifted by the recovery of funds they'd thought were gone forever. Emma watched as the victims' lives improved, and she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, knowing that justice had reached even farther than she had initially imagined. Her fight was no longer just about her own redemption but about making a real difference in the lives of those Alan had hurt. But there was one final twist that Emma hadn't anticipated. As she closed the last account, she noticed an unfamiliar name linked to a trust fund, a trust set up in Leo's name. Her heart skipped a beat as she accessed the documents. The fund had been set up years earlier, around the time of their divorce, and Alan had contributed to it without her knowledge. The account was untouched, as though he had meant for it to be a hidden inheritance for their son, an attempt to leave something behind despite everything he'd done. Emma grappled with conflicting emotions. This was a gesture from the man who had betrayed her in every way, an inheritance she never expected. For a moment, she considered leaving the funds untouched, letting it lie forgotten as a remnant of a painful past. But as she looked at Leo, now growing into a young man with dreams of his own, she realized this wasn't about Alan. It was about giving Leo the future he deserved. She transferred the trust to Leo, telling him about its origins with transparency and honesty. Leo listened, his face a mix of confusion and curiosity. But as Emma spoke, he reached for her hand, a silent gesture that spoke of understanding. They both knew that Alan's actions, even this final one, wouldn't define them. They were moving forward, together, into a future that held possibilities beyond the pain of the past. Years passed, and Emma continued to thrive in her career, eventually opening her own firm specializing in cases that championed the rights of vulnerable families. Leo pursued his dreams with the same drive he had seen in his mother, finding success and fulfillment in his chosen path. Emma's story became one of resilience, not just for herself but as an inspiration to others who faced betrayal and hardship. Her journey taught her that strength was not found in vengeance but in the courage to rebuild, to protect, and to live with integrity. And though Alan faded from her life, his memory served as a reminder of the person she never wanted to become, a lesson in the price of greed and betrayal. In the end, Emma had turned her pain into purpose, transforming a life once defined by someone else's cruelty into one of her own making. The power of her story resonated beyond the courtroom, a testament to redemption, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.